Hello and welcome to the shed. In today's video we're going to be making a set of winding sticks. Hope you enjoy. So what are winding sticks? Well, winding sticks are two straight parallel sticks that you can lie on the surface of the board, and as the name suggests, is to detect wind in your board. Now wind is essentially an Old English word for twist in the board. You can actually line up two pieces like this and determine the twist this way with winding sticks, and the length of the winding stick is going to exacerbate that twist so you know where to remove material, and this is for when you want to flatten the face of a board. Now the winding sticks that we're going to make here today is just using this piece of reclaimed jarrah that I've got here. Now it's fairly square, fairly straight, fairly stable, and that's what you want. You want something that's going to be fairly stable, ideally quarter sawn, and that's where the grain lines go as upright as you can find. If we look at the grain of this piece of Tasmanian oak here, I know they're on a little bit of an angle, but we're looking for them to be as straight upright as possible, and this is pretty close, which means this is going to be fairly stable. When it comes to jarrah, I can't really show you that because this grain's twisted all over the place, but this is a fairly stable piece, even though it might not be actually quarter sawn. What we're going to be doing here today is making a couple of 400mm in length winding sticks. Now, some of you may say that's quite short, and yes, it is, but I'm making these winding sticks for maybe boards up to 200 odd mil. These will exacerbate it enough for you to see it. If you want to make longer you can, but I wanted to make them a little bit shorter here just so they fit in a toolbox easier and they're actually easier to store. And I'm assuming most of you beginners out there are probably not using boards that are too wide, so if you are, make them longer. If not, 400mm is a good length. What we're going to be doing here is squaring and making sure this board is parallel before we cut it into our two lengths for the winding sticks. And then we're going to add a little bit of a shape to one side, one of the flat faces, and that is just so you know which is the front face to actually have facing forward. And then we're going to inlay it, then we're going to inlay this little bit of Tasmanian oak into the face at the top of one of them for that contrast. So let's jump down here. What we're going to want first up is our shooting plane. Whatever plane you're using, doesn't have to be a specialist one like this. You're going to want a piece of wood to elevate this, and we're going to use the workbench as a reference. Since this is too long for my shooting board, even my long range shooting board, we're going to use our workbench as a reference. So what you can see I've got here is I've got it elevated on that piece of Tasmanian oak that we're going to use. Then I've got it clamped down, and because we're only trying to get this parallel to this other side, we don't need to make sure that these sides are square, even though we'll put it on a shooting board and square these off afterwards just because it makes it look nicer. We don't need to do that, we just need this square. So you need something that's going to keep your hand plane square to your piece, so when you shoot down the edge of it, we're going to get a nice square edge here. Then we can use that to reference this side to ensure this opposite far side is parallel, and then we know that they're going to be the same thickness when we come to use them, and that way any difference is not in the winding sticks themselves but in the board that we've put them on. If you don't want to have a stop and actually hold this, it's easier to just clamp this elevated like I have here. It holds it, and then we can bring our plane in like this and shoot it up and down here. If you're getting a full-length shaving with your shooting plane, you're going to know when this is square because your hand plane is square, your bench is square to it, so you know when you're going to be square. Now, the other important thing when we do this process, as always, is make sure that we keep anything, no shavings or anything in this way here. We don't want them getting in the way of our shooting. I need to go a few more runs here. Now, since this was a reclaimed piece, I was actually looking at this little bit of varnish that was on here, and that's how I know that this one's square now. So now that we know that this edge is square, we can go ahead and remove these clamps. But don't get rid of the piece that you're resting it on just yet, because Remember I said we needed it parallel, so that means we need this edge square to this edge. So how are we going to determine that? Well, I like to do this with a marking gauge. You want to lightly reference it like this, and run down and check where the thinnest part of your board is. Now, I eyeballed it and I'm hoping that I got the thinnest part here. It looks like the thinnest part is just here. If you put it flat down on whatever you're referencing it on that you know is square, and drop this wheel style down, you can do the same thing with your combination square for this as well. So you obviously want that flat with your reference here, but what I like to do is just take it a little bit under, because we're going to use that shooting plane again, but we're going to be having our reference of our marking gauge to determine where parallel is. So we're going to run off that edge that we just squared. Run your marking gauge all the way through. Now, on a dark wood like this, that's going to be quite difficult to see. So my marking knife is just sitting in it there. If you can see that line and it doesn't run all the way through, and I do recommend that you actually take it back a notch so you can actually run that gauge line all the way through. So then you have like a straight line that you can reference to, and then you can just run your shooting plane along it until you match that line. But if you have run it through there and you're getting a little narrower than you would like, then you're going to have to obviously target your high points first. Now, you could easily shoot this just using a number 6 or a number 7 or maybe a number 5 hand plane, but lying it down on your bench and using that reference is going to ensure that it's as square as you can get it. And if you're using something about the length of my shooting plane here, which is about the length of a number 5 or a 5.5, then you're going to make sure that it's pretty flat with something about 800mm long anyway, even though you could use a longer plane, and if you do have a longer plane, go ahead and use that for your referencing. So we also want to come in like we did before. So you can see I'm just working this area where it's a little bit thicker, looking at that line. So I'm not sure if you can see that line there. It's literally here right on the very edge. I'm hoping you can see that, but if not, you can see that I'm just flaking this little bit of material off, and that's how much of a line I've got all the way along the board now. I'm now going to run this through once more. Now that we're down to that line, we know that these two are parallel, and you can go ahead and check them if you need to. You can run a ruler on them and double check that it is how you wanted it to be, which in my case happens to be 46mm top and bottom, which means that this is now parallel. So now what we're going to do is grab our board, we're going to grab a tape measure, measure the middle, in this case it'll be 400, and we're going to cut that to length and then square it on the shooting board. So let's jump down here and get to that. 400, put a little nick with the knife. Doesn't matter which side we reference off, they're both square. And then off that front face, I'm just going to run one edge. Today I'm going to use the Japanese back saw because that's a very fine kerf, and that's what we're looking for here. So we're going to start nibbling on that front edge. And we're going to shoot both edges. That's all I needed there. Make sure you keep the same edge up against it. Square. There, that quickly and simply, we actually have our basic winding sticks, and you could use them like this if you wanted to. But I thought, let's make it a little fancy, as you see some of the store-bought ones out there and ones that other people have made. And we're going to do a slight little inlay of that Tasmanian oak that I mentioned. You need to determine how thick you want this little rebate to be. And I'm just going to eyeball it so it's past that split that's just here. In this case it's 7mm. So what we want to do is run a nice heavy gauge line along the top here. Whoop! I just had my fence move on me. Got to make sure these are locked down nice and tight when you're doing this. And back to that gauge line. So as I was saying, you want to make this gauge line as deep as you can. Probably just going to keep it the same thickness across the top here, just for simplicity. Always make sure that you mark your waist so you know. You can get your rebate plane, if you have one, such as this. And that's going to be the easiest way to actually create this rebate. Whether it's a number 78 like this one, or something like a Stanley 45 set up to do the same process, it doesn't matter. Or just a straight wooden one like this that actually has a blade, unlike this one that doesn't. But you could use one of these or a shoulder plane to do it as well. So we've got our depth of cut set to fairly fine. We've got the fence set, so it's coming across as far as we want it to, and we've got the depth set just here as well. So when you're doing this, you want to watch the blade that's back here, push this right up against it to reference it, start at the top edge here, now it's established, you can run right through. The whole time keeping this pressed up against your wood. If you're having problems with this running on there smoothly, a little bit of candle wax. Run it on the sole and on the fence, and that'll help it slide much better. So now you can see we have this nice little rebate here, which is perfect for what we're looking for. Now, when you're doing a rebate like that, you want to make sure what you're attaching it to, which in this case is this piece, is actually nice and square, so when you place it in there, that it's actually going to fit the way you want it to. Now, you might want to cut your board down. In this case, I don't think I'm going to, because I kind of want to keep this board as complete as possible, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to glue this in like this. You could use super glue for this if you really wanted to. I think it's better to use some other glue because it allows you to move it around and get it clamped in nice and tight. However, I'm going to use super glue here for you guys to speed this process up because I don't want it to take too long. So if you are going to use super glue for a process like this, you probably don't want to be using activator. Just let it set naturally, but you're going to have to work fast. So make sure you've got all your clamps on hand that you're going to be using. And on the length of something like this, I'd be thinking you probably want a couple of clamps at least on each edge to make sure it's clamped down, and then a couple along the length of it to make sure that it's held into place backwards. So I would say you're going to want about 3, 4, maybe 5 clamps for this. It's going to speed the process up and make it that much easier. Could easily use a medium super glue for this. I'm just going to use a thin one. It's what I've got on hand, and it's going to soak in and leave no super glue lines of any note, which is going to be good. So I'm going to run it in the corner to start with. That means we're getting full amount of glue there, and then I'm just going to run now. If you do happen to run any on the outside, get rid of that now so you don't have to remove it later. Line your piece of timber up like so, pushing this in here like this. doing one of these clamps up as tight as I can, like so. Start pulling it together that way. Once they're on tight, I can then adjust. Get another one in here like this. Like a clamp in here like this. If it wants to stay on here, which it doesn't want to currently. I've probably taken a little too long with this already. But this thin super glue does take a little while to set, and that's why it's a good idea to use a thin super glue if you're going to. Now that we've got the clamps on there, it's not going to take long for this to set. Just give it maybe 5 minutes. If it took as long as I did to put the clamps on, it was probably set long before that. But you just do your best. But that's why I believe it's probably better to work with a glue that's going to take a little longer to dry, more open time. But if you do use super glue, you're just going to have to be quick. It's now been 5 minutes, so we can go ahead and take these clamps off and see how we do. So it looks like it's stuck fairly well. So our first point of call is to actually come in here and actually cut this piece off here. So to do that, we'll come in with our bench hook, line it up like this, and I'm going to use the reference here, sort ever so slightly off the edge of it here, and then we'll use a shooting board just to square that back after we've removed the rest of this material here. We can see that we've got it all sitting proud here, so we need to square this down. Now, you can rough remove a lot of this first and then put it to the shooting board, or you can do it all on your shooting board on that long grain if you want. That is up to you, because we're trying to keep that square, remember? So I think the best way to do this is to clamp this straight down and use the shooting board. Now, because it's already elevated up this little bit, we don't need to elevate this. We can actually just clamp this straight to the bench, and it's going to offset the offset of the blade in your plane, so we can go ahead and use it like that. So I'm just feeling with my fingers along here, because I can feel how much is left easier with my fingers than with the eyes. So I got a little less down this end than this end. So I'll move there until I feel that it's almost the same all the way through. So now we obviously have to hand plane this part down. Just try and keep it there. And so I'm just starting to take the jarrah from this planing now. So now I'm taking it all the way along here. I'm just going to face plane this whole lot now. Got these little bits that are overhanging from our little inlay there. So what do we have to do? Shooting board once again, you're correct. Or you could use a chisel to pare that away. Shooting board's just going to ensure that it stays nice and square if that's what you're after. Until we take a full shaving, so you can see we took the shaving of the jarrah here, which means we've reached the edge of that. Now, because I want to keep that against the fence, I'm going to face it down this time so you can see it's just here. So once again we hit the jarrah, got that shaving, and now we've got that nice and flush. So we know which way is the front, and obviously on this piece we can't mess up what the front one is. we're going to put a little bit of a detail on the back of this. So let's go ahead, get the hand plane, and we're going to put a little bit of an angle just along the back there so we know. So what I'm going to do is come in at about 45. And I'm just going to work this at 45 for a little bit. So we know I've got a fairly heavy chamfer here. Now I'm going to go on a steeper angle. And I'm just going even steeper. And you can see that I kind of just put this little rolled detail here, and that's going to let me know what the back of this is. Now obviously that doesn't deal with any of these other blemishes that I got here, but I'm not too worried about those. If I was, I would have face planed them out, but I think it's a tool. It shows that it's using reclaimed timber, and so we need to now do the same on this piece. Now what I want to do is just lightly break these corners that we've got here. Now you can use a fine file for that, whether it's a worn double cut or a single cut. Ideally a single cut would be best. Or if you don't have a file that's going to do this for you, you can actually just grab a block of wood, stick some 240 grit sandpaper to it and just lightly remove it. We don't want to heavily remove these radiuses, we still want it to stay fairly square. So we're just going to go ahead, and you can see the process here is just going to be maybe 2 or 3 passes just along those edges like this. Now all that's left is for us to put a finish to this, and like most of my tools that I have in the shop, I just like a little paste wax finish or a hard oil wax finish or just a straight linseed oil finish. You can go ahead and put a shellac finish on them if you want. I don't think that's necessary, so what we're going to do here is just use that hard wax oil that you saw me use when we did the straight edge. This particular hard wax oil is golden teak. Gives a nice little sort of shellac-esque sort of colour, and that's what I like. So with this particular hard wax oil, you can put as much or as little on as you want and then wipe the excess off. It's not like some of these other ones where you just apply one coat. You can do as much as you require. To apply this, I just use a little bit of this blue paper towel, and since it doesn't fall apart, it's perfect for this application. So we just dab a little bit on like this, continue to do that, and wipe it over everything. This, just like the paste wax, because it's got a wax in it, I like to bring this brush back and just give it a polish up like this. And then you just let it dry. And over time, if you need to apply more finish to these, you just apply more finish. And you can see using that horsehair brush has given it a nice luster, which is perfect. It makes it look a little bit like a film finish, which is kind of nice for such a quick and easy finish to apply. So now these are complete, they're ready for use. Now I think what we'll do is cut this video off here. I'll show you another video in the future how we use these winding sticks, but it's a fairly simple process. So there you have it, folks. That's the fairly simple process of making some fancy looking winding sticks, along with a not so simple process, but does cover using rebates that we've done before to add a little bit of an inlay in there. And I hope you enjoyed and appreciated the extra effort that you can put into something like this and make it look beautiful. So if you'd like to support me, please consider liking and subscribing down below. It really does help the channel out more than you know. And while you're down there, please sound off in the comments below. What did you like about this project? What didn't you like? Or any other questions related to this project that maybe I forgot to cover? Please let me know down below. And if you'd like to support me a little bit further, please consider checking me out on Patreon and Instagram. And if you'd like to see another great build video such as this, please check out the video up here where I create a wooden straight edge for you, and also the intermediate woodworking playlist that this video is part of. Bye for now.